We live better than kings. We live like emperors today.
Right.
Business of Architecture, episode 349. Hello, and welcome back, Architect Nation. I'm Enoch Sears, and this is the show where you'll discover tips, strategies, and secrets for building an architecture practice that lets you do your best work more often. Today, our topic is the visible expert. How can greater visibility for you and those on your team help you in your quest to be a better architect, to do better work, and to reach the potential of your creative vision? In this episode, the tables are turned, and I'm interviewed by Waffle and Karl Feldman of Hinge. Hinge is a professional services branding and marketing agency, and they're well known for their very thoroughly researched industry reports. Kelly is the managing director of the Hinge Research Institute, and Karl is a partner at the firm. This episode originally aired on the Visible Expert podcast, which you can find on your favorite podcasting app or at hingemarketing.com.
Hi, I'm Kelly Waffle, and you are listening to the Visible Expert podcast. I have a guest host with me today, Karl Feldman, who's a partner here at Hinge and knows a thing or two about the AEC industry. How are you doing today, Karl?
I'm doing great. How are you, Kelly?
Can't complain, my friend. And Karl, as you know, we've got a special guest today who is Enoch Sears. You know, Enoch is a seasoned and licensed California architect and founder of the Architect Business Institute and the Architect Marketing Institute. He is a highly sought-after expert on marketing and business systems for architects, and Enoch is known for helping architects grow their firms, income, and freedom through effective and unique business strategies. He's also the author of 2 books, The Architect's Marketing Field Guide and Social Media for Architects. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that Enoch is also the host of the Business of Architecture podcast. Enoch, welcome to the Visible Expert podcast.
Kelly, thanks so much for having me, and hello, Karl.
Hey there, Enoch.
So, Enoch, here at Hinge, we define recognized influencers who share their expertise and experience in the B2B and professional services spaces as visible experts. So this podcast is really focused on sharing the stories of our guests and illuminating the challenges and rewards to building a personal brand. I know that you've worked at some construction and architecture firms, and for a while you even had your own firm. So can you talk about what social media and marketing techniques you've used to get people to follow and listen to you?
Absolutely, and it's funny you say that. It was all by accident, and it definitely didn't start out with the desire to have people follow me and necessarily listen to me, but it really came about from me scratching my own itch. Kelly, this was back in 2011, and it was right after the Great Recession. I had been laid off from the firm where I was working, and was really just struggling and realizing that although I had all the technical skills to be a great architect, I'd always focused on everything they teach architects how to know to do, that I had never really grasped the exchange of money or commerce or enterprise, entrepreneurship, how to grow and run a business, how to build teams, how to hire the right people, how to create a culture, how to find the right kind of projects and clients, and so I was under the assumption that all I had to do was hang out my shingle and that the clients would come.
Field of dreams.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Exactly.
The field of dreams. And quickly I discovered that wasn't the case, that I needed to do something, especially since we had moved home to California where I didn't have much of a network because I had been working in Texas and also abroad. And I realized that I didn't have any connections. And so how was I going to get work? And so that really started my own deep dive on uncovering what's behind the business of architecture, how to create a firm that really empowers the creative craft that architects do. And it started out in late 2011. I just had the idea that it would be a great tool for me to run a podcast, because that way I could connect with other architects who had done what I wanted to do and just sort of mine them for information. And so I thought, if I'm going to be connecting with mentors and talking with them and learning from them, why not just use that content And so at that time, I decided, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. And I actually I hesitated on doing it. I kind of procrastinated because it seemed overwhelming. I had all these internal fears about people hearing me and not sounding like I was smart enough, and I didn't know what I was talking about.
Right.
And so what actually kicked it off is a dear, dear lady who I'm friends with now, Osha Wilson. She used to be in the architecture field, has since moved on. But I reached out to her because she had an amazing blog sort of centering around the business of architecture. And I said, you know what, I'd love to have you on my podcast someday. And for me, that was sort of like someday in quotes, someday it maybe will happen. And so she said, okay, well, how's your schedule next week? I'm like, oh
Wow.
no, I better buy a microphone. And so once I did that first episode, it was I couldn't stop. It's sort of like they say when you start the marathon, if you take that first step, then you might as well take the second.
Yeah.
And so I just kept on doing that. And I mean, well, what are we now? Recording in 2020, so it's been almost 10 years later, and the podcast has millions of downloads. It's been absolutely amazing, and it's turned into not only a passion of mine, but actually a business, which is business of architecture, which is now what I do full time. So that's in a nutshell how I unintentionally fell into this.
Wow. So another Field of Dreams reference, you're going the distance.
Oh, there you
that's
go.
terrific.
There you go. Yeah.
So podcasts and books obviously play an important role. Are there any other techniques you use? How much do you really leverage social media or other techniques out there?
Absolutely. So I've always been kind of a computer geek at heart. So for me, it was pretty easy back when I started out in 2011 to fire up a website, to start posting articles on the blog. And so I've always been syndicating the content that I create on the podcast on the other channels. So what I mean by syndicating is one of the advantages of creating content is that you can really slice and dice it a lot of different ways. So if you create a piece of content, I can slice it up. I can put it onto Instagram. At that time, back in the day, Twitter was the big thing. And so I would post things on Twitter. So I really dipped my toe in all the different social media platforms. But I'd say the one that I focused on the most would be the podcast and then also the website. So getting search engine traffic by having really good content on the website that fills a need, that provides valuable information that people are looking for to help them do what I do which is in their business, their architecture firm.
Can I ask you just a follow-on question to that, Enoch? What do you see as, you had your kind of first step that you took into a bigger world. What do you see as the biggest, what's stopping architects from getting into that kind of rhythm, building their visibility? What do you think holds them back? What do you see most frequently?
Great question, Karl. Great question. I think the first thing would be just the overwhelm, maybe not even the overwhelm, but just the busyness of the day-to-day. So whether we call it overwhelm, whether we call it a lot of things to do, architects who are actively working in a firm have plenty of things on their plate to do, like meet with clients, figure out a detail, and get something moving through the jurisdiction who's reviewing the plans. And so I think part of it's is that they would say, hey, look, I just don't have the time. Why would I start a podcast? I don't have time to do that. It's just a time issue. Now, underneath that, I would say that there is maybe a misplaced priority on business development, on client attraction, on visible expertise, as you guys call it. And I mean, there's some symptoms. So there's some bad things that happen because of that. There's some feast or famine that happens. There's some inconsistency of work, because when your focus is on the technical side of it, or the craft of architecture, you're kind of leaving the rest of the business to fend for itself. And I have a good friend who says, she asked the question, who's flying the plane? He says most architects like to be in the back, being the steward or the stewardess, serving the clientele.
Right.
And that plane, who knows where it's going? It's just kind of flying itself. So that's the first thing. And then I would say the second thing would be is the personality type. Anyone who's familiar with the DISC personality profile is a really great one I like to use. But architects are generally, they're high C's and S's. And in common terms, what that means is basically they're more introverted than they are extroverted. They would rather have their head down working on a design than putting themselves out there. And I think that's what stopped me originally from doing it, was just the fear of what people would think. The imposter syndrome, which is the little voice in my head that says, Enoch, you're not that smart. You don't really have anything to share with the world. you're an idiot. Why would people listen to you? And so trust me, it's easy to listen to those kind of voices, and I have them all the time.
Oh
even,
yeah. Yeah. Well, it's any kind of like perfecting your craft. It's such a drive, any kind of creative process, and so many of these things. Taking your step into podcasts. This is a conversation. It's not it's not a perfectly crafted thing.
Oh
And
yeah.
I agree. I've seen that so much. So many.
Absolutely.
My wife is a writer. She suffers from the same kind of call it writer's block or architect's block or podcast block. That's a great observation.
I think you're right on with that, Karl. And sort of it goes into that perfectionist syndrome. So as architects, when I was actually practicing architecture, I mean, there's very real liability if you get something wrong. Not only that, but you want to do your best work. And so we definitely have the idea that everything just needs to be perfect. I mean, it just needs to be as good as you can get it. And unfortunately, that kind of mindset, while great for the craft of architecture and the work of an architect, is detrimental to things like sharing content, publishing, podcasting, which a lot of times there's good enough and then there's perfect. And the difference between those two is years apart. It's like perfect's never going to get reached. Good enough, you can reach good enough pretty good. So
yeah, it's like how can you get into that realm of just it's an easy conversation. It's just a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and if I may, concerning that, Karl, for your listeners, there's different kinds of podcasts, right? So a talking voice podcast is where you're kind of the expert, and forgive me if your audience already knows this, but I'll throw it in there. Maybe mine doesn't. Is the kind of the talking voice where you're the expert and you have to come up with some sort of script and share some content. But there's other formats like this, like you said, that's more of an easy conversation. We're just hopping on. I'm talking about things that I know just because I work on them every day, and we don't have a prepared script, and it's a lot easier to produce something like that.
So, Enoch, changing gears a little bit here. When you were starting out, or even now as you look back, what did you love about being an architect?
Great question. I don't know if anyone's asked me that in a while. I'd say the thing that I love most about being an architect was really the variety. Just the variety of what I got to do every single day. So especially when I got to the point where I moved out of just drawing and I could actually meet with clients or have client phone calls or go visit the job site. That's one thing that I enjoyed. You could be working on a drawing, and then you could go hop in the car, go visit a job site. You could go to a client meeting. So I say for me, it was really a lot about the constant variety and the change of things that we'd be able to do on a daily basis, not being locked into doing one particular thing all the time.
That's interesting. And just going a little bit deeper there, who are some of your favorite architects, or who are you following right now?
Yeah, so there's a number of architects who I admire. Brooks and Scarpa are one, so Angela Brooks and Larry Scarpa. They have a fantastic firm based out of Santa Monica. And one thing I love about their work is they basically call it the ordinary and the extraordinary. So what they do, their kind of philosophy, is that they take buildings that otherwise would be ordinary and they turn them into something by not necessarily, including super high budget features, but they take the resources that they have and they're able to create really incredible spaces, really incredible architecture. So that's one. Another one, an architect, Marlon Blackwell. He's located, I think he's based in Arkansas, but he has a very similar, he practices in Arkansas, and so a lot of his earlier buildings, again, they're not for, hedge fund managers and people that have huge, enormous budgets. He's able to take normal budgets and he's able to work with people who appreciate design and come out with something really unique. Another one that comes to mind would be Jonathan Siegel. He actually develops and builds and designs his own projects, so he has some more freedom in what he does. So the ones that kind of pique my interest are the people not necessarily that can do something really cool with huge budgets, but the architects that can take a limited budget and be able to create something really unique and special out of it.
Right. And we were talking about this earlier, Enoch, and I've heard you say that most firm owners are stuck working in their practice with little time to work on their business. Is that why you came up with the SMART practice method? And for those listeners who don't know about it, Can you explain what the smart practice method is?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I was consulting with architects, talking with them, interviewing them about their business, ultimately talking about their goals, which was to be able to really focus on the creative side of the practice and really create work that was meaningful for them. There was a lot of architects who were just not having that creative void filled because of the symptoms, or I guess the causes of what was happening because of a business that was unruly or unorganized, shall we say, or just getting the better of them. So the whole money side of the practice. And it's really hard to focus and do your best work when you're struggling with the finances, when you're dealing with people issues, when you don't have a good scheduling or management system. And so, there definitely has to be a way to simplify this for the firms that I work with. And, there's no secrets around running a great business, but it can often get very complex and confusing. So with the smart practice method, it's just a way to take sound business principles and to make them understandable and easy to implement in a small architectural practice. And so we talk about what we call the 5 Ps. So, and I'll just rattle them off right here. So there's the personal side. So we believe that as the leader of the firm, that there's a certain amount of self-leadership that needs to happen for you as a person to actually lead from the helm as opposed to be opportunistic and respond to things. And that includes having the right planning, the right preparation, and really, as I like to say, there's a certain there's a necessity to slow things down so you can speed them up. I usually find that most architects are they're working too hard and too fast, and that doesn't give them the opportunity to really slow down and have the space to let the good ideas come out. And so that's number one, would be the personal side, them as a leader. The second one, in no particular order, would be process. So this would be the processes of the firm, including scheduling, project management, the planning, the strategic vision. Next, we have the people. So just as it's a people business in terms of creating relationships, really running an efficient firm is all about, ultimately you're selling people's time. And so people is another one of those pillars. So we have things like organization, roles, teamwork, and coordination. Then we have the 4th P. I think I said, we said process, personal, people. So there's profit, which of course would be the finances. Can't forget about that. You can't measure, or you can't manage what you can't measure. And then last but not least would be the actual projects. So under projects, we would have a look at publicity, getting the right kind of jobs, the pricing, how architects are pricing their services, and then proposing, which is basically the sales process. So through interviewing some of the best in the business, through teaming up and getting help from the best consultants in the industry, we've created, and plus my own experience leading a firm, we've created the smart practice method, which is, again, it focuses on those 5 Ps to help architects be able to really create an engine that powers their creative freedom.
Interesting. I think you've cornered the market on the Ps.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a couple more we could throw in there, but I guess if you know any, let me know. Well, and
right.
It's funny you mention that, because here's the thing. Business is so unruly, and just running a practice can be so difficult. You comment about the Ps, but it's very intentional that we started, every kind of pillar with a P, because it's more mnemonic. It helps people remember them. It sort of simplifies it. And if they can remember it, they can implement it. And that's the key.
Yeah, and I read somewhere that some of the graduates of your methodology here are actually applying a lot of this to their personal lives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mention that. So that's definitely, we look at it holistically. Usually the people that work with us are people who value, they have lives outside of architecture. And, so whether it's family, whether it's other passions or hobbies, a lot of times it revolves around actually being a whole person, being able to really give your all and be a great architect, but at the same time have that other family life balance. And so absolutely, they're looking to create great families, great partnerships, great children, and contribute to their community. So I'm not sure what you may have read, but I know that a lot of our past clients or graduates do talk about that, about having, feeling more peace of mind about how their life kind of fits together, as opposed to feeling like the architecture is kind of taking everything over.
I hate to do this, Enoch, but could you spend a few minutes talking about your poop in the toilet parable and why it's so important to architecture firms?
Oh, gee. That's great. I had to remember. I'm like, what is the poop in the toilet parable? But I think I remember. It'll let me know if I get this wrong. So,
all right.
So we have 6 children, first of all, and so this is where the parable comes from. And as you can imagine, with 6 kids, flush the toilet is like a constant refrain. So I came down early morning. I'm getting up out of bed, and I go on my jog. And before that, I go into the bathroom, and there it is. Some stinky poo from one of my kids that they did not flush the toilet. And so, I'm pretty annoyed and everything. And so we have a chat about that at breakfast. So that's where the first instance comes from. And so what that parable made me think about, or that experience, was that when we have a team, when we have multiple people who are all trying to work together towards something greater, that everyone needs to be focused on pulling their weight. And everyone needs to realize that the details matter, and that everything we does actually has a very real impact on what everyone else does, right? And a quick anecdote to go along with that, I was talking with another firm owner who was based out of the UK, and he had a young practice. They do very kind of high design work, and he has a small team. And he said that one week as a kind of a test, so he was frustrated with the culture and maybe feeling like his team members were just focused on what they needed to do instead of having more of an owner's mindset. And he said he came in one day and he noticed there was a candy wrapper right in the middle of the floor, like right where everyone would walk by. And of course, normally he would bend down and pick it up and throw it away. But he thought, I'm going to test, and I'm just going to see if anyone else picks up that candy wrapper. And so he said that it sat there for a week. And he said
my God, that is...
Yes.
That's life as a parent right there. There is no difference between work and home sometimes.
There you go. And so you get it, right? So it's the same thing with the poop in the toilet. It's like, someone else may do it for you, but really an ownership mentality is something that the owner's going to expect out of the firm. So it's, pick up the candy wrapper. So as you can imagine, he was pretty pissed off and pretty frustrated. I don't know if he confronted them about it, but he eventually threw it away and he just thought, man, my team's just not taking ownership. And so he saw that there was a problem there in his culture. So that's funny you found that. There you go, Kelly. I think that's what it was about.
We have a knack for that in our research.
Oh, you guys are good.
Finding
all the good stuff.
Scatological nugget. Yeah. Very good.
It really caught my attention, and I had to read the story. And you were talking about inspect what you expect, which is what you were just talking about. But in the story, you go into more details about how you had to run to the store and get the parts to fix the handle, and you saw that the flapper wasn't coming up high enough and all that. So you fixed all that, and you thought it was good. And then your kids came back and told you that the toilet still wasn't flushing, and you didn't know what to make of it. And then you went back to check, and you saw that it wasn't set up correctly, and you had to go in and tinker with it a little bit more. So it is that ownership mentality of make sure you follow through and it's done the way that you want it to be done.
Yeah, it's all coming back now. The more it's coming back to me, and isn't that the same story where I shared that I tried flushing it, literally the poop like exploded over the bathroom or something? I think there was.
Oh, no, I didn't read that part.
we have lots of these poop stories, in this household.
Wow.
Oh, good.
Well, yeah. 6 kids. I'm sure you got a lot of stories.
Yep, we do. I mean, I think the sanitation facility here in Visalia, they're going to charge us a surcharge or something for how much we contribute.
Speaking of your children, and I know you've got 6 of them, I did read a little bit about your Labor Day with them and how you got fairly up close and personal with the California Creek fire. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So that was not too long ago. And what happened was we had planned to go up to the mountains about 45 an hour away from where we're at right now, and to a friend's cabin. We were invited up there. And on the way up there, we saw just this, we knew there was a fire burning, but you just saw this huge plume of smoke. And now some may have questioned our sanity in continuing our vacation, but we thought, we'll see where it blows. It's far away, we were going to be farther up in the mountains, so we weren't really worried. But eventually we did end up getting having to get evacuated. So on the very next day, someone came around knocking on our cabin. The wind had shifted. Entire lake that we were staying at was completely covered in smoke, and driving down the mountain it was late at night, and it was pretty eerie to look on the mountain and to see all of basically the mountains were in flame. It really looked like something out of the Inferno. You just saw these trees burning. It was on the couple ridges past us, but it was there, and it was pretty terrifying.
Yeah, it's been quite a year for California and those fires, huh?
Yeah, it really has. Absolutely. It's been incredible and just mind-blowing. Now, granted, for the past 10 years almost, we've had droughts off and on, which have caused an infestation of something called the bark beetle. Maybe too much information here.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's caused about a third of the trees in the Sierra Nevada mountains to die, and so it's perfect kindling for things like this fire. But here's the analogy with that, right? Is that it's too easy to think that we'll be okay, right? So that was sort of the mentality that we had going up there to the fires. Like, you know what? It's over there. It's not close. We're going to be fine. And I think that a lot of times in our businesses, this happens as well, that we have our heads down, work's coming in right now, and we think, you know what, we'll be okay, even though we may see some smoke in the distance. And it's not usually until the fire's upon us that we reach out to get some help. And that's haven't found that to be a useful strategy, as my story attests.
Yeah. The other thing, Enoch, you think about when I was listening to that story is the interconnectedness of everything too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's absolutely a cycle, and just like that ownership mentality and that intentionality to your actions, you can have unintended consequences with things. You can't take it for granted. I mean, the world we're living in right now, it's a testament to that. But
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it really is it is a testament to the fact that systems exist. Everything's a cycle. So we talk a lot about business systems, and we think about our ecological system. It's a system. Bark beetles kill the trees, and we think, well, that's kind of sad. And then the next year, lightning strikes, and before you know it, half the Sierra Nevada mountains are on fire, right? And so, kind of the same thing happens in your business. And I know something that Hinge preaches, and you guys are leading the industry, is helping professional services firms, get their messaging right, be able to create visible experts, really strengthen the client acquisition side of the business, which is sort of like getting the sunshine and the water and the nutrients to the trees, right? Because without those nutrients, the trees are going to wilt up and die. Yeah. So I'm curious, since I have you guys online, can I ask a question to you guys?
Sure.
Kind of flip the tables a little bit. So what have been the effects? Have you seen an increase in competition that's causing it more important now than ever for experts to be more visible in their practices?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're coming off of the bark beetle and wildfire analogy, but that's kind of an apt analogy. I think a lot of firms are finding themselves staring into the face of, they hadn't taken those first steps to visibility. They knew it was lurking out there, but it was more of a concept and we'll get there thing. Mm-hmm. And with everything that's happened in the world, it's really pushed it right to the fore. So I think that the good news is an ultimately solvable issue. I mean, we like to say with a lot of folks that we work with that we look for evidence that firms that we work with do good work, because those are issues that we can't necessarily fix. But visibility and getting your expertise to shine, that we enjoy helping teams with. Mm. So I think if anything, we've seen, for all of the challenges, this whole pandemic situation is also a real catalyst for our industry. So it's pushed forward a lot of the trends that we've seen, over the last 5-10 years. It's just all moved forward very quickly. And kind of taken a lot of the objections off of the table. That, it's a
yeah. So with a lot of folks that we talk to, it's very similar to your analogy, Enoch, is that they see stuff in the distance and they're well-meaning, and they want to prepare, and they want to update their website, they want to strengthen their visible expertise, they want to do more research, but for whatever reason they keep putting it off until the fire is close to them, and suddenly they're caught flat-footed and they don't know what to do, and is there a way to get out of it, and all that kind of stuff. So I think this kind of stuff is, like Karl said, is now helping people to reprioritize some of the stuff that they were doing before, and realizing that referrals are down, customer loyalty isn't where it once was. There is more competition out there. There's more consolidation. A lot of people are looking. Our own research shows that people are looking to have relationships with firms that have strong subject matter expertise. So that is like one of the top criteria they use when they evaluate a firm is, does this firm understand my problem and what I'm trying to achieve and all of that?
Enoch, I think you opened us up with that good, painting that picture of, architects also as craftsmen, right? And it is focusing on the craft, doing the work. It's hard to balance these things, and we understand that. That's why it has to be, just like your approach, that it has to be methodical. It has to be something where you can balance in the same way you balance, as a whole person, the work and life. It's also the visibility and that craft. How do you balance those things? It's persistent. It's a persistent challenge.
Yeah, I love it, and I love the visible expertise, the way that you all have framed that concept, because it's one thing to be an expert, which is we have expertise, and let's face it, architects do. Whatever field they're in, right, they have a deep field of expertise. Yep. But if someone hasn't heard of you before, or if they haven't ran across something that you've published or something that you've done, you're going to look the same as everyone else. And so to them, they're going to have difficulty identifying an expert, right? Because the way that we in our society identify experts is, do they publish? Have we read something of theirs? Have we seen something of theirs on TV? And so, it seems like just a small shift to make, but it can have really huge rewards for firms that go down that route. And my story is a result of that. I mean, just that I've kind of fell into this, but it was because I decided to share my expertise, except instead of keeping it to my chest, and not just my own, but share others' expertise as well, become sort of a fountain or a sounding board or a publisher of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Karl, I've got two more questions for Enoch. I didn't know if you had any questions you'd like to ask.
Well, yeah, while we were talking about balance, I was going to ask you a question around your balance of your home and professional life, because I think that's something that a lot of our listeners are probably identifying with, the clash of professional life and home life. And having 6 children certainly gives you great analogies, but with your kids, what would you like them to take away from your professional life? I have one son, so it's less focus across many, but I watch with intrigue how this environment, working from home, virtual learning, all of these things, what does it impact? And some of that, he's picked up some of that closeness to my professional life, and it's made me question, like, what lessons would I like him to take? So question for you, Enoch, with your children and as involved as you are in the architecture community, what would you like them to take from your journey so far?
Great question. I think what I'd like my children to take, now, first of all, I have to give a shout out here to my wonderful wife, who's really responsible for the smooth functioning of our house. But
Amen.
Yeah, I'd be remiss without that. But I definitely, for me, my fatherhood is a priority. I wouldn't have had 6 kids unless it was really important to me to make sure that they got the best. And what I try to do is, number one, I want them to take away that belief in themselves, that they can achieve whatever they put their mind to. Really, if they hustle and work hard, that the sky's the limit. So really a feeling of personal confidence and belief. And then probably the second thing that would go along with that is that if there's something they don't know how to do, they can figure it out. I mean, I grew up using Google. So Google really didn't kind of explode on the marketplace until about 2000. But even before that, I was using Yahoo. And nowadays, if you're determined, there's really, I mean, my son, I was just out there earlier today. My wife trimmed the bamboo. And see, like I said, she's a hardworking woman. And my boys are out there. They're making a raft out of bamboo. So we have a pool, and they're like, they're just out there, at home, and they're like cutting up the bamboo. They're taking off all the branches. They looked up on YouTube kind of how to and they're using string to tie the raft together. It's like, I'm like amazed. So, that would be one thing. And then the other thing would probably be resiliency, that just being more resilient, that life is hard. My life hasn't been a cakewalk. I've struggled. I've had really difficult days, really difficult times, deaths in the close family, financial poverty and hardships. And I just, my one worry for my kids probably is that we live in so much abundance right now, even with our complaints about our society and everything that we have. The fact that I can, go flush the toilet, bringing up the sewage analogy again, it's like I can brush my teeth. I think I was reading somewhere that the kings of England, it wasn't common. It was common for them that, they didn't have any teeth, and just body sores everywhere because the sanitation wasn't great. I mean, it's like we live better than kings. We live like emperors today.
Yep.
So gratitude, it's amazing. We really are quite blessed.
It is it's an interesting perspective to look at the world through the lens of kids. And I do think, in this environment now, in one sense, everybody is on a level playing field because we're all grappling with a lot of the same kind of global issues going on. So it's for all of the challenge and sadness, there is some opportunity for solidarity there, I think. With that, and you mentioned earlier when you were speaking about some of your clients, culture. If you define a firm's culture as the way that they do things, and you spoke about the ownership mentality, and really following through with your actions. That's one of the things that we've seen in our recent studies too, just the importance of culture in terms of attracting talent. So as you scale, as you grow your firm, there's visibility for the experts themselves, but there's also visibility for even a smaller team's culture. How do they do things? What have you seen in your journey along those lines? What kind of is it the same kind of challenges you see? And the teams might have great culture, but it's invisible, so it's like a best kept secret for people looking for an architecture firm to join.
So concerning culture, it's a difficult concept to really understand. It's difficult to understand how to create a culture. It's sort of like trying to catch a greased pig. It seems like the tighter you try to hold on to it, the quicker it slips away.
The whisper of Rome. Yeah.
What's that?
The whisper of Rome. Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that. What's the whisper of Rome?
Goodness, it's like Rome. Back in the day, the greatness of it was just the word. It was just the whisper.
Yes.
The concept of Rome.
Yes.
That traveled so far around the world. That's that. Yeah.
Well, and that's a great example because we know what we think of when we think of Rome, right? And for small architecture firms, a lot of their culture is generated from the personality of the owner. And that's what I call a kind of an organic culture, that it just kind of happens because the owner is who they are, and they haven't necessarily taken any strategic directions or implemented anything to try to really create an intentional culture. So I would say 80% of the small architecture firms, small being under 20 staff, would fall into that category where they have a, shall we say, an organic culture that's kind of happened and got created. Now, the other ones, the ones who, let's call them the ones who care about what they're doing so much that they're willing to invest in themselves and their staff and be intentional about what they're doing, they can create cultures, and every firm culture is different, right? So one that comes to mind is a friend of mine out of Houston, and she's really built her culture around, so she's a woman architecture firm owner, and she's built her culture around the fact that it's an open place for women to come work and be able to balance motherhood and other duties outside of the workplace. Now, it just so happens, I think last time I checked with her, that all of her staff are currently women. I don't think that was intentional. She said we would hire men, if they were the right fit or whatever. But this is something that all the people working there are on board with, this idea that one of the reasons why we do what we do is so that you don't have to be here late on a Friday night, right? We're going to get the right systems in place. We're going to be able to run this like a business so we can still do good work.
Right.
And that ultimately is going to allow us to, be mothers, have children, be part of our families' lives. So I bring that up as an example of a culture that would be very conducive and welcoming towards a woman who wants to be a mother and wants to have children, right? Whereas in other firms, I know that sometimes women have to leave the firm because they feel like, if they're not there late at night every single night, that they're not pulling their weight. So, a culture
Right.
could be around design. A lot of them are. We go after these kind of designs. This is our ethos. But I think really the culture really also has to be around the people. How do you treat your people? What is the understanding of what's acceptable and what's not? A lot of firms, some firms have the culture that we're here and we get the work done and everything else is sacrificed for the work, and so it just depends on, number one, what you want to create, and then number two, are you being intentional about it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we do see it riding along with that, the individual expertise, in such the collaborative world that we live in both, potential clients, potential talent, teams themselves. It's riding right along with that. We have great expertise about things, and we also care about the way we apply that expertise. I think is what we've been seeing as a trend, that just continues to gain strength. So appreciate that. Thanks for your perspective there.
Yeah, because we also see in a lot of cases, especially larger firms, that the culture is really driven by the chemistry and the personalities of the employees, not necessarily from the leadership. So, like you said, culture is really fascinating but difficult to really get your hands around.
Yeah, and it's difficult to create, as you mentioned. I mean, you have to be the guardian of the front door. You got to let in the right people, otherwise the culture will just disappear.
Yep.
Exactly. Enoch, we only have a couple minutes left here, but I was curious, what is one special thing, whether it's personal or professional, that you would want to achieve in the next 12 months?
Oh, the next 12 months is such a short time frame. It's hard to say. Well, I mean, I have annual goals. We do that. We practice what we preach, right? We have a 12-month plan. We break that down into quarterly plans. But on an off topic, I was with my kids at the lake just this past weekend, and I was thinking, what? Next summer we got to buy ourselves a ski boat. We got to buy ourselves a ski boat. So
that's
I was just thinking, the kids are, we got to have fun. I was just realizing that's. Even with my emphasis on family, like I work so much and I'm like, I don't think we're having fun like we used to, and what would it hurt to get a ski boat? And sure, they're expensive and sure you spend a lot of money on gas, but just being able to take the kids out, every other weekend in the summer, or being able to take some of my kids' friends out. I thought, what, life is here. We got to live it while we can.
Yeah. If your kids veer towards engineering a little, you might have a bamboo ski boat. on your
Absolutely. Maybe we'll do. Yeah, maybe we'll
There
do
you
that.
go.
Yeah.
I'll send my son over. He'll bring out the nerdery that way.
That's one way to keep the price down a little bit.
Absolutely. I love
That's
it.
right.
I love it.
Finally, Enoch, where can folks go if they want to learn more about your smart practice method and then your podcast?
Absolutely. So they can go to smartpracticemethod.com. That will take them to a web page where they can get free access to a 60-minute training that goes over the pillars of the smart practice, and it's completely free. They can get access to that. And then the other way to follow me is just to go to businessofarchitecture.com. You can check out the podcast on any podcast player that you enjoy listening to, and be happy to converse with you. Drop me an email, enoch@businessofarchitecture.com. That's ENOCH at businessofarchitecture.com.
Well, this has been terrific, and this really concludes our podcast. I really want to thank both Enoch and Karl for your time today. I really enjoyed it. I've got like pages of notes here. So thank you both.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a
Thank
blast.
you, Kelly.
Appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
And that's a wrap. If you enjoyed today's show, please head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. I read every single one. Also, I'd love to get your feedback on this particular episode or the show in general, as well as your recommendations. You can reach us by emailing podcast@businessofarchitecture.com. This podcast is brought to you by Business of Architecture, a leading architect business consultancy. Access our free training on how to structure your architecture firm for more freedom, fulfillment, and financial success by going to smartpracticemethod.com. The views expressed on this show by my guests do not represent those of the host, and I make no representation, promise, guarantee, warranty, pledge, contract, bond, or commitment except to help you conquer the world. Carpe diem.